Blacksmith of the Apocalypse. By Arcuser. Chapter 801 Clear Cheating. Sitting around a small fire with a warm meal, Seth explained what had just happened when he leveled up. Puffles had seen his level and deduced as much. Tatzel was not yet at that stage and was surprised to hear the things Seth talked about. "It's a little different for us," Puffles explained to the surprised Tastel. The Emuji was also able to hear what they talked about just fine, despite not having the level needed to hear it. "How so, Puff?" Seth asked him curiously. The Ivisor had already gotten so far on this path, he had to know more about it than the two of them. "Python explained it to me. The path differs a lot depending on one's inheritance and affiliation, especially for those who are not players. You would first need to understand what the power of existence is," the Ivisor explained. According to the Nightmare Centipede, it all had to do with legends and tales. For him and Tatzel, one a being equivalent to an angel and the other a species with a good chance to become a dragon, their power of existence and level of existence naturally accumulated and grew. "That's how Python explained it to me, but it's obviously different for players. You should ask Lena about that." "Well, the point is that there is no need to keep it a secret to us since we will naturally grow to this stage, even when we are not guaranteed to reach the pinnacle." "And what is power of existence then, oh great and wise centipede? What does it do?" Seth asked what really interested him. Well, depending on your path it allows you to bend the rules of reality." Seth's clueless expression made the Ivisor continue. "For example, my path is the light bearer and I simply follow the path left by Ivis, the god who created my race. The path allows me to grow stronger by absorbing the power of the sun, though the past battles helped in increasing my level of existence lately. When I achieve the goal I have the chance to inherit the authority of Ivis," the Ivisor explained as if it wasn't much. "Doesn't that mean you will graduate to become a god or something?" Seth asked baffled, but the Ivisor shook his head. "Ivis is dead. There is no divinity to be inherited. When I become a legend, I only have a small chance to inherit power over the sun, as far as I know." "Okay, but you didn't really answer my question. What is the power of existence?" "You got me. I have no idea how to explain it. Go ask your princess." The Ivisor suddenly got into a huff. I didn't mean to tease you, Puff. I'm sorry." "It's alright then, let's forget about the details. What about Tatzel?" "Yeah, what did Big Mom about me?" the Emuji interjected curiously. "PFF, you haven't even stepped on your path, why are you so excited?" "Well, anyway. From what Python told me, Tatzel's species is one of those closest to becoming a species of true dragons or something. So you will naturally grow, like me, and have a chance to become a dragon at the end of your path." The blacksmith listened to the centipede rambling about paths and power, but nothing really got stuck except that he had done well, picking these two up. And that they would easily outgrow him at this rate. Despite saying to ignore it, he couldn't help to keep thinking about the power of existence. It was clearly the crucial component for everything that had to do with becoming and being a legend. Seth had an inkling when he combined his suspicions with some of Puffle's statements. Yet, like an itch he couldn't scratch, he felt like he was simply lacking information. Untypical for the system, his brain wasn't just flooded with all the needed information when he got the quest. What he knew for certain was that he had to be ready before reaching Level 100. He had only 5 levels left. Checking his level, he also found that Puffle's rampage had already filled his experience gauge by a 1/10. Maybe it would be better to return home for now and have a talk with Lena and Beemont. The blacksmith had no doubt that if he had gotten this quest, most of the others in the abyss would also get them soon if they had not gotten it already. Well, maybe he had some doubts. Since the quest talked about requirements and conditions, maybe not everyone with him had what it took to choose a path of legends. Orihumas were guaranteed to have no restrictions, Seth knew that. Any resident of Earth should have had the potential to reach Level 100, but this didn't mean everyone had what it took to go further. Even the 3 choices he unlocked had insane requirements if one thought about it. Since the system was clear about not supporting anyone past that point, how many would be able to go further from here? Even if they did, it didn't seem like it would be easy to grow past Level 100. So far players only had to kill monsters. But past 100? Seth could only make an assumption about the power and level of existence past that threshold. "If we are returning, we should look for the others first." Mom Tatzel brought him back into the dark tunnel and their small campfire. "Right, let's look for them tomorrow," he said a little drowsy. Ding! Your creation golem Knight 4 leave 89 has been destroyed. Ding! Your creation golem Knight 5 leave 90 has been destroyed. The blacksmith's eyes flew wide open. As their creator, Seth had a special connection with the creations he had given a soul that counted as their own units. Aside from being able to roughly feel their location, the system treated them as part of a subordinate system. It wasn't the first time some of his golems died, but this time it was something special. These golem knights were golems with a soul and could usually recover, even if they were destroyed. It was the first time he lost golems with a soul. Usually, he felt just the loss of this vague connection. Had the system changed after he entered the last stretch, or was it the fact they were living golems? But why would a notification with the direct names of the golem be part of the no-spoiler rule? There were a few questions, but he quickly forgot them when he remembered with whom the numbers 4 and 5 were. Shit, guys, we have to move quickly. Seth got up. Before they left Mina's Palin, Seth had offered all the teams to take some of the golem knights along. There were many situations where they could come in handy, especially as additional backup during an emergency. Only Yul Katzfer was the only party that didn't take the offer. Lydia's team 3 had the numbers 6 to 10 and Monique's team 1 had 1 to 5. This meant that Monique and her team were probably in danger if they not only brought out the golems, but some of them were even destroyed. They faced something that could destroy someone's soul. What is wrong, Mom? Yet, what is going on all of a sudden? The two asked, perplexed at his sudden actions. Monique's team is in trouble. We should get them first. Get in the pet spaces, we have to hurry, he answered shortly, before pulling his hood over his face. For others, it might have been a problem to find Monique's party. The communication orbs didn't work between the outside and inside of a dungeon. The map skill couldn't show the interior of a dungeon from the outside, either. However, it was different for Seth. Apart from his compulsive precognition that somehow helped him have a good instinct, he was able to rely on his items. There was the guidance of the Cloak of Hecate and its intuition plus. In addition to that, they were the Alniyat leg guards. Most of their effect worked to guarantee a safe journey. If he, despite that, got into an annoying situation while blindly following the cloak's guidance, he had Apollo take the wheel, to steer him safely back on track. With all that in the back of his mind, Seth started sprinting. Following the stars of the Cloak of Hecate, he could only hope that he was not too slow. Theater dimension. That's clear cheating, the dungeon god exclaimed incensed. What are you even babbling about? He is an aspirant of the path, architect of life. Of course, he would notice when some of his higher creations were harmed. The system god shrugged his shoulder innocently. No, you pulled something. I know it, the other insisted. Wait. There is nothing like that. Stop it with your baseless accusations, just because you don't want to lose a bet. Chapter 802 Taunting. Elemental Dungeon 30 minutes earlier. A claw made of a dark spiritual aura spewed sparks as it ground against Tekker's barrier, a mere moment after he spoke to them. It looked overwhelming and terrifying, but the weird energy skill could not hide that it was applied to a palm without fingers. Hey, now. We are really thankful you got rid of the airhead for us, but no need to get pushy. You are the dude Seth met when we left the Holy Land the first time, right? The guy that slaughtered the Adventurer Guild and ran away from our Tower Master, leaving a trail of body parts. Monique spoke cool and confident, even mocked him, all to signal strength to her party. Under the surface, she was shaking in her boots. This was a guy who managed to run away from Seth, who was serious about trying to kill him. Dragos stepped away from the party. What a hard shell is this? Why you are still so confident? I can't wait to see your faces once I cracked your shell and... You seem pretty fit, for someone who should be suffering from the curses of the Adventurer Guild, Monique simply interrupted his psychotic monologue. Haha, you think a bunch of curses could stop me? I'm barely weakened by resisting them, he boasted incensed. It was clear that it was not as easy. The guild had several of his appendages, which was more than enough to curse someone to death several times over. Monique, are you sure it's a good idea to taunt him? Ray asked, unsure. It's exactly what we have to do. Unless we get him out of his own rhythm, we might not stand a chance, she whispered, remembering Seth's story of a man with hundreds of skills. Now he also had crossed leave 100. They had no idea about his skills, so instead of attacking blindly, they had to confuse him and buy time to observe his powers. Look at him, he doesn't seem okay at all. He seems rather angry, Allison suddenly stated loud and clear, in her bored voice. Right, I bet he is really pissed thinking about how our guild master not only turned him into a cripple but even allowed the adventurer guild to retaliate, Jonah added. Oh, man. I didn't know you had it so bad. Do you want to talk about it? Tekker offered him a shoulder to cry on. Dragos was not amused. The crazy smile had vanished from his face. Stop it. Neither do I need your pity, nor can your childish play agitate me, he said in a cold tone. Now you did it, Shay exclaimed in a panic. You got him really angry, he added with a sneer. Did I? Ah, I'm so why. Did I make Dragos angry? Monique chortled. Stop that. Dark aura branded against Tekker's shield. Why are you so angry, Dragos? Jonah asked hesitatingly. Stop bullying him, guys. Tekker scolded them good-natured, which made Dragos seethe even more. I don't need your support, Beanstalk, the chosen of Amit exclaimed, crashing into the barrier. Look at the whittle guy. So brave and stunning, Allison said dryly. She was starting to have fun. Just you wait. Once I rip this barrier to shreds, all of you are dead. Suddenly, several auras encased the enraged man as he lashed out. A storm of magic shook the barrier as a pair of claws hit it, forming cracks on its surface. His legs were also enveloped in the murky aura, delivering devastating kicks. I think that is as angry as he can get. Tekker mumbled. You think so? I think there is still some wiggle room, Lydia said as she gave a sign. Several silver figures appeared around them and jumped out from the barrier to fight Dragos directly. They were Golem Knights. Originally, Monique had wanted to save them for the boss fights as a distraction, but she opted to bring them out here. The 5 knights swiftly surrounded Dragos and began weaving their attacks together. The party was taken aback by their weird movements, but with their flawless teamwork, the swords created a deadly pattern. Even though Dragos was clearly stronger, he was constantly covered in cuts and had a hard time breaking the golem formation. It would have been a brilliant display of a group of weaker combatants taking down a mighty opponent if it wasn't for the fact that the sword was barely able to graze the man and all injuries healed in a matter of seconds. The golems wouldn't be able to defeat the man. It was good that that was not their purpose. Without warning, a 6th sword joined into the fray and directly impaled the man from behind. Dragos' rage-filled scream echoed across the wasteland but stopped moving. Using the chance, 5 swords joined the first and pierced his chest. Like a mighty beast, he started thrashing as the paralysis wore off almost immediately. The group of golems jumped back as divine chains raised from the ground to bind down the foe even further. The only one still sticking to the chosen of Amit was Jonah. Dancing around him, he used his sword, claws, and the blood ribbons to turn Dragos into a mess and absorb his vitality like a leech. In the process, Dragos became angrier and angrier to an irrational extent. It was the maddening evil eye doing its work. Seth had told them that this guy had a lot of skills, but had a problem utilizing them to their full extent. The angrier he was, the fewer skills he would be able to utilize correctly. Currently, it seemed like he had only strong passive skills and the aura claws going for him. This allows Jonah to exploit the effects of the Sword of Chains as he kept constantly dancing and slashing to trigger its effects. Despite what was previously shown, Dragos' health regeneration started to slow and many patches of dull grey metal started growing on his body, very slowly though. He needed to have a similar set of resistance skills as Tekker, judging by the short duration of most of the effects. Nobody interfered, fearing to break the fragile balance. On one hand, was a crippled berserker, on the other an elegant elf dancing around him with pride and beauty. The fight went on for 10 minutes and everything went in Jonah's favor until he got impatient. His opponent was enraged, not completely clear in the head. Jonah saw his chance and stabbed at his throat while casting control. One of the sword's powers that allowed the wielder to control the opponent if the sword threatened their life. What happened next was all in a speed neither of them was able to react to. When the tip of the sword touched the man's throat, his claws moved at unfathomable speed. One slapped the sword aside while the other directly stabbed at Jonah's chest. The leather armor couldn't stop the claws for long, but it was enough for the swordsman to slightly change his trajectory. Instead of stabbing into his heart, the claw gauged out a trail from his chest, like an ice cream scoop. He instinctively got distance between himself and Dragos, but the other made no attempt to pursue him. Phew, that was close. I really have to thank you for clearing my head, he said eerily calmly. The golems didn't wait for his next move and re-entered their sword formation, however, things went differently this time. He managed to perfectly evade the swords, weaving through their attacks. With quick decisive moves, he managed to crush 2 of the 5 golems, shocking the entire party. His claws had slipped through their armor, after which they suddenly turned into piles of armor and bones. The 3 other golems did not hesitate and kept attacking, but Dragos was now easily evading their attacks. If it wasn't for you trying to manipulate my mind, I may have been a goner. Heal cure stamina up, defense up, agility up. After thanking Jonah, he calmly started rattling down skills while still evading the golems. Magic and divine aura spears shot at Dragos, but it was too late to pile on him now. Dragos had already recovered from all signs of battle. He might have been even stronger than at the start. With a cruel smile, he turned to the party. Round 2. Chapter 803 Round 2. Gah! Dragos suddenly exclaimed when a sword pierced his lower back. Round 2 it is, Jonah agreed grimly. He had already managed to recover from the devastating wound just fine. When it came to regeneration, he was not far behind the psychopath cannibal. The aura claw swiped at the swordsman, but this time Jonah made sure to evade flawlessly, leaving a deep wound on Dragos as he pulled away from him. Although he seemed to have recovered all damage, the wound still healed visibly slower. While his attention was on the swordsman, a spear embedded itself into his shoulder. Monique frowned. She used Athena's throw and aimed the fang of decay at his spine, but Dragos managed to shift his body in time to dodge a fatal hit. Despite dodging the fatal hit, it seemed like the mental disruption had taken effect, as Dragos started swaying and looking around in confusion. With a twitch of her wrist, Monique used a skill of Athena to retrieve her thrown spear while charging forward to attack with Tatzel's sacrifice while Dragos was out. Just enough time for Jonah to enter a sword dance. Elegantly like an acrobat he danced and built up the number of blood streams around him before charging at the confused chosen of Amit. The streams of blood that followed him like ribbons, were like a meat grinder. At this point Jonah understood that the reason he healed slower was not just because of the vitality he absorbed from the man. The wound slashed by the sword healed even slower than the gash left by the blood ribbons. There was something about the sword that hurt him even more, but Jonah didn't have the time to think about it. He concentrated on using the man's own blood to create even more weapons. The influx of damage helped Dragos escape his confusion even quicker. Under his breath, he kept chanting skills as he evaded the attacks of Jonah and the 3 golems. A moment later he managed to land a kick on the masked man, catapulting him into the distance while his claws severed the legs of another golem. Ignoring the 2 golems left, he seriously faced Monique, who was clad into an aura of fervor, as if his confusion and weakness had been a lie. The supernaturally fast claws grabbed the spear that was aiming for his face. Unsuccessfully. The spear he had wanted to grab had vanished, instead, it appeared at his waist and stabbed for his kidney. He could feel it. The spear ignored all his defenses and resistances. He tried moving out of the way, but it was too late. Iapeto's stab blew a chunk of flesh out of Dragos' waist the size of a basketball, revealing his intestines, lower ribs, and upper part of his pelvis. It was the worst wound he had ever received and he could feel that it was not healing. Dozens of announcements told him that his resistance to curses, to dark magic, and status ailments had kicked it, but he failed to completely resist. He felt a dark demonic energy permeating the flesh around the wound. He angrily swung his claws at the spear woman while trying to heal himself. Using triple chanting and quick cast, he tried using cure, heal, and other support skills and spells, but even high heal could only slow the festering. All while still fighting the elusive spear woman who turned out to be a tough nut. She was a fortress of dodges, blocks, and counters, all the while being covered in an increasingly dense aura of grey divinity that slowed and deflected his attacks. He had to layer several buffs to overcome her through sheer power, finding an opening. When he finally thought he got her cornered, she suddenly vanished, switching places with a wall. No. With their tank. His aura claw, which was about to tear out her heart, crashed into his humongous shield, only leaving a little gash. It was just a small impact on his shoulder, but he was instantly flooded with notifications. Ding! You have been afflicted by fear. Ding! You have resisted fear. Ding! You have been afflicted by the curse of burden. Ding! Your curse resistance is too low. You have failed to resist the curse of burden completely. Ding! You have been restrained by Allod's destiny. Ding! Your status ailment resistance is too low. You have failed to rest Allod's destiny completely. Duration 2 minutes. With a mere tough, he had been afflicted by a curse and a skill. What kind of skill was this, that it not only overcame his leave 7 status ailment resistance but still bound him for 2 minutes? Several more impacts stacked the curse of burden to the point that even he, with almost 700 strength, started feeling a tremendous weight on his shoulders. The two golems also didn't stand on ceremony and tried their best to take off his legs. His skin was tough and his defense high, but since he couldn't move, they started hacking pieces of his legs like they were felling trees. It would have been hard to endure, without pain resistance. Leave 9. Then suddenly, all attacks stopped. Water prison. Lightning storm. He heard the cries in the distance. He was suddenly encased in a water sphere that added more pressure to him, in addition to the curse of burden. As if the water pressing the air from his lungs wasn't enough, dark clouds formed above his head and dozens of lightning struck him in the sphere. The electricity jerked his body and he felt his muscles and tendons ripping from his bones, while the water surrounding him became so hot that he was being boiled alive. Without the shields, he cast in the last seconds and his various resistance skills, he might have actually died. Nonetheless, it was the first time he got a peek at his own mortality. He was never before so clear about his own fear of death, as much as at this moment. It was at this moment, that he finally felt a decision he had been delaying for a long time. When the lightning strikes finally ended and the water sphere was releasing, Dragos flopped to the ground, seemingly dead, but the party had gotten no death notification. Monique was about to throw an aura spear at him when Dragos suddenly started twitching and cramping as if he was still being shocked. He screamed out his lungs. It was the first time the party heard the psychopath scream out in pain. It looked like he was suffering terrifying pain in his last death throes. The party hesitated to get closer, unsure what he was up to. When he finally fell silent, they saw a round object roll from his hands. Before they could get closer, things escalated. They watched in horror as the massive wound at his side closed. It did not regenerate anything, it simply stopped festering and grew new skin on the still healthy flesh. One of his eyes had popped during the electric bath, the empty eye cavity was simply grown shut with skin. Boiled tissue and dead skin slid off his bones like pudding skin, being replaced by fresh skin from beneath but leaving the new places, for example, his head, bald. The result of the grotesque transformation was that the formerly almost handsome man was turned into an abomination that looked like a half-rotten undead covered in fresh skin. They could only stare in horror as Dragos scrambled on his knees, staring at his hands and body as if he himself was in disbelief. Moments later the creature screamed in despair and anger. No, no, this can't be, this isn't what was supposed to happen. This I shouldn't. You. It's all your fault I turned into this kind of monster, he screamed like a banshee. As he screamed, his whole body was covered in the same dark, murky aura that had previously only covered his crippled hands. You will pay for this, he said and vanished. Chapter 804 I have a pair of legs to catch. Jonah pulled himself out from the hill he was burrowed in from the kick. His face was grim as he felt something break when Dragos kicked him. He managed to recover just fine this time, but he had a concerning guess as to why the golems broke so easily. Healing himself as quickly as possible, he tried to exit the hole. He had to let the others know about his conclusion. They couldn't allow themselves to get hit by that aura, or else. He kept frantically thinking, but his thoughts suddenly stopped when he finally got out from the hill and saw the thing Dragos had turned into completely covered in that weird aura vanish and appear right in front of Monique. He was too late. Monique's vision suddenly shifted. She had been staring at the place the Dragos creature vanished, now she stood further to the right, looking at Tekker. He had switched places with her. Not a second too early. She had no time to get her bearings back when the disfigured psychopath appeared in front of Tekker. The aura claws pierced the tank's barrier without slowing down and crashed into the lethargic bulwark. The massive shield creaked and cracked as Tekker was pushed back, despite his weight and the shield's ground anchors. Monique got goosebumps thinking what would have happened if she had received that attack. Unlike Jonah, she didn't have the power of self-healing powers of a nightcrawler. She would have been dead, then and there. Don't you dare think this paperweight will be able to save your life! Dragos exclaimed. Having lost all self-control, he recklessly started smashing into the shield with everything he had. Seeing the cracks on the shield grow, Monique recovered her senses and turned to attack. They couldn't wait until the shield broke. She wanted to act when a thunderous voice shook the plane. Get away from my shield, you ugly beast, it commanded with absolute authority, to the point even the enraged Dragos halted his actions. Monique looked up in shock and joy. There he stood, their hero in shining in dark armor covered in blood and chunks of flesh. She could not help feeling relieved that their tower master had appeared, even if he looked like he ran through a container of slaughterhouse waste. Seth had rushed here without care for his surroundings. Despite Alniyat giving him great chances for a safe journey, it wasn't perfect, not in a place like the Abyss. However, to save time, Seth simply ran past or through any obstacle that was not hard enough to stop him, turning him into a Christmas tree decorated with organ tinsel. He arrived just in time to catch some disfigured humanoid about to break one of his items. Of course, he was glad none of his friends were hurt yet, but it didn't he could accept someone breaking one of his babies. You. It's you. Finally. My revenge, the deranged thing screeched and directly charged at him. For the others, it was like it vanished, but not to Seth, who had the power of Thaya's vision. It was fast, but not fast enough to reach him before he could react. The moment it arrived in front of Seth, it faced its own mirror image in Antares, just before being blasted by blinding light and burned by scorching light. The thing screeched as the holy light of Apollo burned away the murky aura and the top layers of its skin. Using the chance, Seth teleported behind it and bisected it with a slash through its waist. The beast's flesh was incredibly tough and the draconic blade almost got stuck. Seth was surprised when he found the sword had gained several nicks from the single slash. Ugh! You will pay. I will kill you, the thing seated on the ground. It was burned crisp and cut in two, but it was not concerned at all. As expected from a thing without a soul. The blacksmith had not noticed it immediately, but like the things from Y City, Seth was unable to see the soul of this thing. This coincided with the fact that Thaya's discerning eyes were unable to get any accurate information about the thing. It was no longer part of the system, so the skill only delivered vague estimations about its overall strength, speed, and danger. However, this was also a little different. The burned skin was healing, but instead of regenerating the severed limbs, the separated halves tried to reattach. This was more reminiscent of the Zarkist style of reassembly. Be careful. That aura, I believe its aura can harm souls. Jonah called out frantically, as he rushed over. Stay back, this thing is still dangerous, Seth commanded seriously, as he casually cut off one of its arms. At least he tried to, but the creature had left its lower half behind to evade. There was something deeply disconcerting watching a mutilated torso moving on only its arms. You care for these people? Haha, I kill the little birdies in front of you. I will savor your despair. Blink, it vanished, only to reappear right beside Jonah, who was the closest. This time it had not moved there physically, it had used the blink skill. Even though Seth immediately followed using Scorpio escape, he was a step too late. Jonah was no pushover, he was surprised, but still managed to block the sudden attack. It didn't cost him his life, only both of his forearms. Seth could hear a distinct ring, something he had never heard before, but directly knew what it was. Jonah's soul armaments had been destroyed. This proved the man's words with overwhelming certainty. The aura of the beast was able to arm souls, to the point of breaking the soul armament he made for them. In anger, Seth attacked. Shattering stomp struck the torso in the back. The earthquaking skill blasted its flesh and pulverized the bones on impact. If it broke the soul armament and did enough damage to Jonah's soul, there was a high chance he might have lost his forearms permanently. It was only at a later time that he remembered that he could make him prostheses afterward. For now, he grabbed Jonah and directly shoved him and his forearms into Legion. Go ask Angelique for help, he told the swordsman, who was confused about who that was, but didn't get the time to ask. Now to you. He said grimly, but the gleeful grin on the healing torso distracted him. Aren't you a little too laid back? It asked at the same time as battle noise could be heard in the distance. What in the... When Seth turned to the party, he found Monique, Tekker, and the two golems fending off a pair of legs attacking them with vicious kicks and agilely evading the magic from Ray, Shay, and Allison. Water, ice, and other magics missed, while Ray's curses showed no effect at all. Haha, where are you looking? He heard and suddenly felt an impact in his back, followed by a screech and curses. Turning around he found the man, lying on the ground, his arm was completely smashed and showed no signs of healing. Putting one and one together, Seth couldn't help but laugh out mockingly. The being had attacked him with a powerful strike, wielding an aura that could destroy souls. In exchange Sargas not only negated 80% of the damage, it also reflected a huge portion. Although Seth didn't know whether the demonic enchanted that reflected 40% damage could reflect soul damage, but he was sure Tisiphone's mirror did. Looking at it, the 50% that were reflected were not just enough to smash its arm, but also kill all the millions of tiny little souls inhabiting the cells that made up the arms, otherwise, it would have been regenerating already. If you will excuse me, I have a pair of legs to catch. A circle of brightly burning pale blue flames descended on the creature. Even if the soul fire on its own was not terribly effective against these immortals, the constantly burning, soul-devouring flame would keep it busy and hinder it from healing and fleeing. Chapter 805 Star-Breaking Kick. Star-Breaking Kick. Seth appeared behind the lower half of Dragos and kicked it in the crotch. It was the dreadful attack that had once felled even the hero. However, the kick itself, albeit devastating, was unable to phase the pair of legs, aside from catapulting them off in the distance. Monique, Tecker, and the others looked at the situation a little embarrassed. Seeing the blacksmith deal with the situation the moment he appeared to put a scratch in their confidence. It had been a hard fight for them, but it ended almost anticlimactic. What in the world is this thing? Seth asked when he finally got the chance to talk with them. That is, was Dragos Cernat, the dude you told us about, Monique answered unsure. Really? I feel like he was a more difficult opponent the last time. What did you guys do to him, to turn him into such a deranged monster? He was deranged from the start, Allison commented calmly. Well, that's true. Seth admitted. It was uncertain whether the bard had managed to read their mood and try to cheer them up, but through their talk, they realized that Seth only had an easy time, because Dragos was deranged enough to try and face Seth in a direct confrontation, when he barely managed to escape the last time they met. Even if he had dozens of skills from the people he killed and hearts he had absorbed, maybe even skills of monsters, who knew? Even with all that, it wasn't worth much if he couldn't take advantage of all of them. Seth had a similar problem taking the skills of his items into account. When he tried to take advantage of everything he had, his awareness was spread thin. In that sense, his experience in the Kenyan dungeon was a blessing. He seldom had the chance to explore the fighting styles based on his skills and legendary items to their full extent. The time in the dungeon helped him consolidate many of his skills into several tactics to use them effectively and decide on which he was going to pursue in the future. At the end of the day one had to choose their preferred fighting style, like Dragos with his claws. What became clear to the blacksmith was that he preferred staying at home and making items over fighting. However, when it came to fighting there were three paths he preferred. The first was obviously his fire, but he had reached already the peak of this path. At least he didn't know how he could become any stronger than being a kin of fire. What he decided to pursue in the future was the mastery of his items and his skills as a bard. On the other hand, he was not going to waste any more of his time trying to learn earth magic. He was not cut out for earth magic, even less than he was for music. The undeniable proof was the fact that earth affinity had barely leveled up after he got it through the blessing of Hades. He would still use it when the situation called for it, but he wouldn't bother trying to level earth magic in the foreseeable future. Despite this decision, Seth pulled out the giant's meteor rod. This was for one simple reason. It was clear that Dragos had somehow used a version of Cromwell's immortal serum, implying that he actually had a connection to the scene. The reason Seth brought out the staff was because he managed to master the best way to deal with these things while fighting on the bridges. Covered in the spear's passive sandstorm skill, he swung his staff and used quick cast. Petrifying winds, he shouted the spell's name and a whirlwind of desert sands enveloped the lower half of Dragos. The experience and insights he gained in the dungeon over the past few days helped him to complete the desert spell. This time it could really petrify the targets, instead of just covering them in a layer of stone. Seth relied on the power of the legendary item to overcome the high magic resistance of Cromwell's undead, however. Ding! Target has resisted your spell Petrifying Winds. Petrification will last 5 minutes. It seemed that easy to petrify an immortalized Dragos. The creature he had turned into still had all the powers he had when he was alive, even with his connection to the system lost. However, 5 minutes was a long time. All right everyone, get into Legion. I will call you when I finished him, he said without waiting for their response. There was no knowing what other skills Dragos had he could use to aim at them if they stayed outside. The bard just wanted to know them in safety. For once, he decided to ignore their opinion on the matter. Ugh! Ugh! Dragos whimpered covered in the devilish flame. It wasn't the pain that drove him to insanity. He could deal with the flames eating away at his grotesque body. What really gnawed at him was regret. His mind was in chaos. He had lost his connection to Amit. He had lost his connection to the system. He had stepped on the path of legends, but now he couldn't even feel that power anymore. He lost everything. Not everything. He could still feel the powers of dozens of skills in his changed body, but he had a hard time grasping them with his mind. The weird power of existence was also there, somewhere, but it was a concept out of his reach. Where had he gone wrong? He had underestimated his prey, but this was not how it was supposed to be. This was not what he was promised when they gave him the syringe. He was supposed to be given a perfect immortal body. Instead, he was imprisoned in the body of an abomination, with all the terrifying wounds and pains he suffered, irreversibly branded onto his body. He was supposed to gain unlimited power and growth potential, but all he felt was fragmented. He had a hard time concentrating and keeping a single thought. He should have never taken the serum. No, he shouldn't have underestimated the little birdies. This damn demon gave him the wrong intel. He had started waiting and searching when Pain Indias told him they would come, but they didn't come from any place the demon gave him. It took days to find a single party. He had been impatient to have his revenge, to get new skills, to grow stronger. He was excited to see their faces of despair. He wanted to trample on the man who made him suffer his first loss after becoming chosen. With his strength, he had become negligent. Burning and healing and just lay there, lamenting his fate. Suddenly, a heavy stone was thrown on his chest and the flame slowly extinguished. Looming over him was the man in the armor, the Tower Master of Minas Mar, his nemesis. Between his fingers, he was twirling the injector Dragos had used to take the serum. "Kill me. I don't want to live like this," Dragos muttered. "I'm sure you would want that, or maybe you are bluffing." "Well, I'm not Santa nor your fairy godmother. I have something else planned for you." With a wave of his hand, a massive metal cube appeared on the plane. "I can't gift you death, but look at this sweet one-room apartment that will be your home for the rest of your life. And it is completely free." Dragos looked one last time at the dungeon sky before his half-burned torso and petrified legs were shoved in the box, unable to resist. "Don't blame me for being cruel, I just have some use for you." Chapter 806 Follow when we are done. "Not cool," Monique berated him when he brought them back out from Legion after stashing away Dragos in his special shipping container. "I'm sorry," the blacksmith obediently apologized. "So, what did you do with Dragos? Is he dead?" Allison asked calmly. Seth's action garnered mixed reactions from the party, but especially Allison didn't care enough to talk about it. Aside from Monique, who felt a little hurt in her pride, most understood his reasoning. He didn't want to expose them to any weird shenanigans Dragos may have pulled. "I stashed him away securely and put the box in a storage room in Legion. I also found this injector. Maybe Cromwell will have an easier time making a weapon against these things, with this and Dragos as a test subject," Seth supposed. Okay, but who is that new angel?" Shay asked, more interested in the new addition to the team they met inside Legion. "Right, how did you pick up Angelique?" Jonah joined the water mage in asking. The swordsman's arms had been successfully reattached by said angel. They were lucky that Jonah's soul had not been damaged, at least not to the point that his arms couldn't be healed. Seth was about to answer their question when Monique interrupted them. "More importantly, what are you doing here? Don't get me wrong, I'm glad you came, but how come you came here?" Monique took the initiative to ask. Seth explained how he reached Leave 95 and got a quest. When he tried to tell them the contents, he was censored, which answered the question of whether any of them had already reached Leave 95. "Well, anyway. So I got this quest and a bunch of info and wanted to return to Minas Mar to talk with Lena. When I was thinking about looking for you guys, so you would also return once you reached Leave 95, I got notified that 2 of my golems died, so I ran here as quickly as possible. So there is a decision to be made at level 95. Maybe we could reach it when we finish the dungeon." Monique mumbled. "But Dragos killed the wind boss. He would have the key part for the door. I doubt he would just give them to us now," Ray mentioned. Seeing Seth's asking look, they roughly explained what happened in their dungeon and what they needed for the last door. "Oh, maybe you don't have to worry about that," Seth said and brought out a small black cube. "I found it beside the injector. Cromwell said people literally die when they transform. Since Dragos dropped his item box, it seems like that was true." Allison and Seth talked briefly about the interesting conundrum, that someone who died in a dungeon would usually send back to the closest adventurer guild, yet that was not what happened to Dragos. Seth's theory was that most likely the dungeon god's power lost its target when his souls turned into a soul cluster. While Allison still mused about it, Seth checked the contents. Inside the killer's item box was a mountain of loot. Potions, damaged armors, weapons, money, all the stuff he had probably taken from his victims and had no way to get rid of. There were quite a few epic armor pieces. It was weird that Dragos himself didn't wear any of it. I heard there are some classes that block the player from using items, Allison commented when she heard Seth mumble to himself. I see. Well, anyways. Take a look inside, maybe the key you need is in there, he said after not finding anything of interest for himself and gave the item box to Monique. There really is a lot of junk in here. She mumbled when she got a look inside. Oh, there it is. Now we can pay a visit to the last boss, she exclaimed, holding the piece of wind for the door at the bottom of the dungeon. What about the wind crystal? Allison asked, interested. Wind crystal? Seth's ears pricked up. So far every boss dropped a crystal in addition to the key for the last door, Tecker explained readily. I can't use them, maybe they are blacksmith ingredients, the alchemist mentioned. Crystal of Maltus, crafting material. Relic. Part of the accumulated power of Maltus. The crystal holds a strong power of fire and lava. Crystal of Olaf, crafting material. Relic. Part of the accumulated power of Olaf. The crystal holds a strong power of ice. Crystal of Sephrite, crafting material. Relic. Part of the accumulated power of Sephrite. The crystal holds a strong power of earth and stone. Suddenly, Seth had 3 different crystals in his hands, all of them relic-rated materials. Unlike the marbles he got in his dungeons, these were pure crafting materials Seth would be able to use for accessories, or maybe wizard staffs. Yep, I can use them, thanks, guys. Back to the topic, do you want to come with me, or finish the dungeon? Seth asked about what they planned to do. We will finish the dungeon and then return to Minas Mar, right guys? Maybe we can also get to leave 95 before returning, Monique spoke up. Can we rest a little first? Yeah, I could also use a break. Monique's powerful answer was met with moderate enthusiasm and limited support. However, her team stood behind her. Seth looked at them with a wry smile. Taking into account how they fared against Dragos, he didn't have a doubt that they could manage the dungeon, even if they themselves lacked some confidence. What will you do, Seth? Are you returning right away? Allison asked unperturbed. I think I will return now. For a moment, I thought about looking for the others, but I don't think that's necessary, he answered after giving it a thought. Lydia's and Mike's teams were probably doing fine, too. Seth wanted to return and pester Lena about the Path of Legends, so he could prepare before reaching level 100. With all the resting and fighting, Seth could only guess for how long he had been stuck in the dungeon, and he realized one thing: fighting was no fun. The blacksmith wanted to get back into his workshop. On one hand there were the things he had gained on the journey. He wanted to take apart the club he got from the dragon newt and have a better look at the essence of Kova. Of course, there was also the handful of relic-rated materials he got. On the other hand, there was still work waiting. He had yet to finish the prototype of the Armor of Lunacy. On a side note, Seth also thought of spending some time with Cormac Pale. Since he was the chosen of Hephaestus, Pale probably had blueprints and recipes he didn't. If they came to an agreement where Seth could learn those, they might become a valuable addition to his craft in the future. Delivering Dragos was also added to the thing on his mind. He was sure the mad scientist that had recently joined would be happy about a research subject and the injector that probably still had traces of the serum. It was unfortunate that this likely was not the perfect serum Cromwell had been bragging about, but another dumbed-down version like the one used on the drugged foot soldiers. What about the other teams? Monique asked. If Seth left now, the others wouldn't know about returning after reaching leave 95, and it wasn't like Monique and the others could find them in the abyss as easily as Seth. Don't worry. I'm sure they will make the correct decision if one of them gets the quest. I also suspect that some of them would know a little bit about what is to come. Doho and Finn are experienced otherworlders after all. I see, then we will follow you when we are done. Good. I wish you good luck with the last boss and don't forget to have fun. Home call. And like that the Tower Master vanished from the abyss, leaving them to deal with the final boss on their own. Chapter 807 Rinse and Repeat. Seth returned in a great mood, with plans to get an explanation and advice from Lena and return to his cozy workshop to keep working on his skills and items. The reality of his return was very different, as he suddenly sat on his desk in his office with a report on the things that had happened while he was gone. Most prominently Lena's summary of the situation in Y City. He read with a grim face. When he finally finished, he took several deep breaths and let out an audible sigh. Massaging his eyes, he looked up at Lena and Mary, who were also present. They looked at the blacksmith worried. Seth had no idea what he was supposed to do about this. This was on a completely different scale than the blacksmith had brain power for. It was one thing to see the scene as some underground organization that was manipulating people and events from behind the scene. This, on the other hand, human trafficking, human experimentation, and organized genocide, this was on the scale of the whole district. They were not talking about thousands but about millions. They were technically facing a dystopian state. Was he supposed to go to war with the full district of Ypsilon? It wasn't just winning a battle, the blacksmith already shuddered when he thought of the whole rat tail that came with the liberation of a whole district. At the end of the day, Seth was a normal man, not a politician, not a ruler, not a general. There were two desires fighting within him. The side Seth associated himself most with was done with this world. He just wanted to care for the people he liked. Carve out his place in the world and protect it with tooth and nail. Ignore the rest of it. Getting involved would come with a lot of problems, work, and sacrifices. Was he ready to make those? The other side was this little voice in his mind, that told him he couldn't look just away. And no matter how many excuses he voiced to himself, the stupid little voice wouldn't shut up. He also couldn't just burn the district down, as much as he wanted to, because the little voice adamantly insisted that it would do more harm than good. "Do you have any plans?" he finally asked the two. "I told Cade to collect hard evidence. I have suspicions that the actions in Y City might be the result of a foreign force interfering. If we can get proof of this connection and their atrocities, I might be able to get support from Krina. What if you don't find evidence for outside intervention from some foreign power? Would Krina still help?" The blacksmith asked, demotivated. "Krina won't interfere with local business unless they are under our supervision or our allies," she said, depressed. Her crestfallen expression told him that she had already tried everything. "In the meantime, thousands of people will die. We should send Cade reinforcement to sabotage these killing factories," Mary asserted. The secretary was for a more violent course of action. "I would rather speak with everyone if we are provoking an all-out war." An awkward silence started to fill the room. It seemed like they had come to a dead end, as nobody came up with a satisfactory answer. In an attempt to distract himself, he took another report. After Lena's and Mary's decision, Little Sigma decided to help rebuild Beta as a colony of the Muir Empire. The envoys in question even asked for a sapling of the hanging tree within the district and a connection to the tree root. One thing stuck out to Seth. The reason Beth had mentioned to Lena, why they needed their help. Their goal was to rebuild Beta and allow the people to return to a safe home. Seth was about to facepalm, as his selfish side made a familiar deal with the tiny voice. "Call Karina, we are expanding the tree root," he suddenly stated. "What are you talking? Is that about the thing in Beta?" Mary asked, perplexed. "No, this is about Ypsilon. We are expanding toward Y City," he said resolutely. "What happened to talking with the others before provoking a war?" Lena asked, as confused as Mary. "Who said anything about war? We are expanding Minas Mar to siphon away all their victims." He had been so preoccupied with the weight of the atrocities that he had almost overlooked the obvious answer. To do the same as they always did before. The blacksmith didn't want to stand at the helm of war, he just wanted to carve out his place in the world and protect his people. Then the answer was easy. Make them his people, give them a way to come over, and when Y City tried to pursue them, he would kill anyone that dared to cross his arbitrarily expanding borders. Being a savior that interfered in a complicated situation came with a long rat tail, but giving people a way out of a tough spot didn't do as much. Over the board, Y City was still operating as a normal district. They were only abducting the people nobody would miss. Right now, these people were in the same situation as the refugees of Sigma had been in Delta. Inside might be a horrible place to stay, but just leaving the district for the wilderness had even fewer chances for survival. However, as long as he created a safe route, Y City couldn't officially do anything to stop the people of Earth from migrating to a different district, namely Minas March. They would, once again, simply steal away the people the scene was trying to exploit. If they wanted to use violence, it would happen on Seth's terms. He felt a lot better with that than sending his people into that hellhole of a city not knowing what they may face. Although it was not a perfect answer, begrudgingly Mary accepted that they couldn't just storm the whole district and save everyone that was captured. Even Minasmar didn't have that kind of manpower. I will also agree to open a path to Beta. Having another ally can't hurt. I guess we will have to strengthen our territory in case the scene intends to attack again. On that note, I have some good news. I managed to secure passage for some valuable personnel and I sent someone to look for the vampires of Sigma. The vampire that had stayed back to keep a watchful eye on the fallen district despite their low numbers, they all possessed monstrous strength. If they were willing to move to Minasmar, they would be powerful allies. I get the vampires, but what valuable personnel are you speaking of? Seth asked confused. Their info is included in the papers. The princess pointed at the stack of documents. Seth looked through them for a while. His brows jumped up when he read what she was talking about. Who would have thought she was serious back then, he mumbled when he saw the first applicant. Are you sure this is true? I didn't think she would do so well, he commented on the second person Lena invited. I wouldn't have invited her back, if it wasn't true, Lena assured. Shortly after there was a knock on the doors and Karina entered the office. Seth, you are finally back. What did you call me for right after arriving? The Dryad asked friendly. One would think the first people you run to should be Mina and Finn, not these two, she teased a little. Those two are already back? Seth asked surprised. He had been dragged into the office, first thing after returning. Yul Cat's fur arrived yesterday. Mike said the nature of the dungeon they chose proved to be difficult for them and since the exit was closed, they had to use home call to return, Mary reported dutifully. You should have told me earlier. Did you even tell them I returned? Either of the two was too embarrassed to look him in the eyes. They had been waiting on him and the rest of the lords before making a decision. When the Tower Master finally returned, they jumped the gun a little. Seth sighed, it seemed like the past week had been a lot of pressure on them, too. Especially Mary seemed eager to make a move, no matter what move. What? Mary suddenly asked, seeing Seth intensely stare at her. The blacksmith had been surprised at how well Mary had developed from the shy healer he had saved by coincidence. Over the past years, she had turned to be a hard-boiled businesswoman he could trust with a lot of things. Maybe this eagerness was part of her growth. I'm just awed by your growth. Now that she was no longer the little healer that had a hard time just getting by in a cruel world, but someone in power, she had not forgotten how it was to be helpless. I have no idea what you are thinking, but I feel like you are reading too much into something. Mary said hesitatingly. Well, maybe. Arim, excuse me, why am I here again? Karina asked. Oh, right. We have some plans to discuss. Do you think you are up for another expansion? Kukiku, I have been preparing since you mentioned another expansion the first time. Chapter 808 Power of Existence. Lena, stay back for a moment. They had talked for a good while about the details of what came next and had just finished. Mary left to take care of the administrative side while Karina returned to the children. However, he stopped the princess from leaving. Since we have finished talking about official business now, it's time to talk about something private. Lena blushed a little, her face grew hot. The two of them were alone in the office, it was already late, and he suddenly mentioned talking about something personal. But he already had Mina and Finn. She remembered her brother bringing up making Seth his brother-in-law and gulped. She was torn. It was true she was looking to maybe pick up a closer relationship with him, so she could be closer to Finn, but when it was him suddenly coming at her out of nowhere. Should she resist so she wouldn't be hated by Finn? Or maybe she should just give in and hope Mina and Finn would welcome her like Mina did Finn. Her thoughts were out of control as she already started to imagine a night with him and one with him and Finn. She imagined how their relationship would work and... Hello? Earth to Lena, are you still with me? I reached leave 95 and wanted to ask you for information. I know I said I was going in blindly, but I got these weird quests and inevitably became curious. Lena, he waved his hand before her eyes and brought her back from dreamland. What? Ah. Oh. What? You reached leave 95? That's great. Really great. She stuttered. It had all been a misunderstanding. It was all just in her head, how embarrassing. Are you okay, Lena? You seem confused, Seth asked. Sure, sorry. I was distracted. So what was it you wanted to know, she asked, getting her bearings back. Seeing that her attention was back on the conversation, Seth described what happened when he reached leave 95 and got the quest, the last stretch. What exactly is this power of existence it mentioned? The blacksmith finally came to the main topic. Lena, who had managed to calm down while Seth talked, took a moment to formulate her answer. You probably heard about the status of a legend, right? After all, you already managed to create legendary items, she began. Right, I also had my own conjectures on what it might be about, especially when Puffles mentioned that it has something to do with actual legends. Relics always state that they can become legendary items if they become well known or have a big part in their wielder becoming a legend, but it can't be about simply becoming well known, right? The bard asked jokingly. This had been his working theory for the longest time, but how would becoming well known increase someone's power? Wouldn't stars and celebrities become literal gods for simply being popular? However, Lena answered with a pondering face. In a sense, it is just that, she answered him dryly. You can't be serious. How would that work? How do gods gain power? The princess suddenly threw a question at him. Through believers and sacrifices, he answered unsurely. Correct. Gods are born or created through the accumulation of beliefs from many people. Power of existence works on a similar principle as the power of belief in deities and gods. There is power in the acknowledgement of intelligent life. The question is whether someone can harness it. Suddenly, Seth was able to answer the question of why celebrities didn't become immortal gods to himself. Ordinary humans couldn't harness this power. They were like a boat without a sail. No matter how much wind blew, they didn't have a sail to catch it and advance. And the path to legend is the equivalent of the aspect, domain, or the authority of a god that allows you to harness this power. Lena completed his sentence. It was the sail that allowed them to catch the wind and advance. The system is a great help when trying to advance to become a legend. Even when it will stop all other support, your chance to become a legend is a lot higher than without it. These last 5 levels will be the hardest because each level up will tune your body toward the path you chose, Lena explained. When it says I lose all support, what exactly does it entail? You won't gain free attributes or skill points anymore. You keep all the system privileges you earned so far if that is what you were worried about. Anyway, so you gain the power of existence through your path and the path also dictates what you can do with the power. Lena steered the conversation back to the topic. It mentioned that the path of legendary blacksmith would allow me to use the power to turn relic-rated items into legendary ones. How does that work? Seth eagerly follows her back to the topic. Let's see how to explain. Right, you made an armor with dragon scales, right? Where do you think their powers come from? Because they come from a legendary creature, right? Right, and as part of the legend of dragons, everyone knows their scales are incredibly tough and protect dragons from almost anything. Their power is derived from their power of existence. If you were acknowledged as a legendary blacksmith, it's just common sense your items would be legendary too, right? You would use your power to turn items into legends as an extension of your own saga. Legendary items are also a good example. If a relic becomes a legend, the item's power would grow to match what people thought of it. For example, a very tough sword becoming indestructible, because people believe it to be so. Belief shaping reality. The bard mumbled. Exactly, power of existence can tweak the rules of reality. Of course, you need a lot to have any major impact on anything. Even gods are limited on the aspect and scale of things. Seth's thought took a weird turn at Lena's comment, as his mind wandered to the gods. That means the system god is a real big shot and an absolute tycoon, right? He blurted out. None of us can even start to fathom the kind of business the system god is running. Was Lena's only comment. Anyways, to sum things up, you gain power of existence through the path you chose. It will limit how you gain power and what you can use it for. When you start off, you should primarily use it to increase your level of existence until you become a legend. In other words, once you are past level 100, power of existence is the experience you need to level up. And what does the level of existence do? Since Seth had the chance, he was going to ask every question he had. It's the impact your existence has on people. How long they will remember you, and how likely it is for them to become fans or followers. Since you won't go around creating a cult of devoted believers, your power of existence will depend on the concurrent people knowing of your legend. Your level of existence helps in keeping those numbers high. I see, so as long as my level of existence is high, I won't have to worry about making a publicity stunt every few weeks to bump up my income. Exactly. I think I have a rough understanding now. The next question would be my path, right? I wanted to ask you whether Krishna has a kind of catalogue of known paths and their unlock requirements. I can see almost 24 paths in the window, but only 2 are available. To be honest, neither legendary blacksmith nor legendary goldsmith really speaks to me. We have some documentation from previous legends, but I don't have it here. What other paths are there? Maybe I can tell you some I remember the princess offered, and they started looking through the list of options. Chapter 809 Paths. I'm really sorry, Lena repeated herself. The two went through Seth's list of options, but the princess was only able to confirm his suspicion that he did not meet all requirements for them. Lena only knew the more common paths from memory. One was legendary enchanter, for which one not only needed to master enchantment but also needed to create a legendary enchantment before reaching level 100. Seth was predominantly a user of enchantments, not a developer. Creating a legendary enchantment was several times harder than the requirement for a goldsmith or blacksmith to create a legendary item, since using a legendary material could be seen as a shortcut. Of course, one had to get their hand on a legendary material first. Maybe it was debatable what was harder to accomplish: getting a legendary material or making a product that gains so much traction that it turns legendary. For the bard who grew up in the information age, the latter didn't seem too far off. From their conversation, he gained a much better understanding, although the whole nature of the subject was nebulous at best. However, in the end, the main issue was still present. The blacksmith skill set was varied and the paths he had unlocked didn't quite fit what he wished to pursue. Since the path also restricted the means of how Seth gathered this power of existence, he wanted to cast a wide net that would work with all his creations. Could I choose more than one path? Seth asked, interested. Maybe if he took both, the legendary goldsmith and the legendary blacksmith path, he may have felt better about it. Yes, but I would advise against it. The more aspects you start with, the harder it will be to advance. You won't just need more energy to level them, the efficiency would also lower. 2 paths would need 4 times the energy, 3 would need 9 times, and so on and so forth. It would be easier to choose one at first and maybe try for another later on, the princess gladly explained, after being unable to help with his paths. This sound weird. Are there people that can become a legend and then simply take up another one? He asked suspiciously. It sounded like just becoming a legend was already a lot of work. Were there really people who did that multiple times? Yes, as well as there are people who chose several paths from the start, there are also people who became a legend by adding more paths later on. You have to keep in mind that you stop being an ordinary mortal once you are a legend. They have a lot of time to do stuff and develop further, Lena mentioned. Seth stared at her, having another realization. The blacksmith had only thought of it as a way to keep becoming stronger. He had not really thought what becoming a legend would even entail. What other benefits are there to becoming a legend, Lena? He asked her carefully. Oh? Arim, as your level of existence rises, your aging will be slowed and you will have a longer lifespan. You might also heal quicker and it will also be harder to kill you in general. Depending on your path there would be different passive changes like higher attribute increases or stat corrections. She counted the benefits on her fingers. Doesn't that mean I would be technically immortal? Seth asked with an awkward feeling in his stomach. Obviously, Seth was not keen on dying, but eternal life? It sounded fun on paper, but he knew enough fiction to know that it could be a terrible curse. Well, your lifespan would depend on your legend. If you are worried about living for eternity, you can just retire. Even if you become a legend, when people start forgetting you over generations, you will also lose your power, she reminded him. It was weird. Seeing the princess smile, as she assured him that he could always choose a natural death, was macabre, but it also calmed his worries. However, few legends choose that. If a legend dies, it is usually a violent death, she added. Really, what about losing their family and watching everyone they know slowly age and die away until they are all alone? Don't they get depressed? Whoa, those are some dark thoughts. Why not look at it the other way around? They get to see and protect their descendants and those of their friends. Watch them grow up, and help along the way. Protect the nation or the people they love. They might find love with another immortal existence, then there wouldn't be any worry of them aging away either. Life has a lot to live for. Lena actually quoted her uncle. Actually, he was her uncle separated by several generations, as he had become a legend over 100 years ago. When she was young, Lena had asked him a similar question. Ever since then, she had kept his words in mind. Eternal life didn't need to mean solitude. It always depended on the person in question. Right, I could simply make sure Mina, Finn, and the others also become legends, the blacksmith exclaimed. What? Wait. How did you come to that conclusion? Do you have any idea what you are saying? Lena asked exasperated. Becoming a legend was not easy, most people died long before they reached the zenith, however, Seth just claimed who would create a whole team of legends as if it was a batch of swords he makes on an afternoon. Seth just shrugged his shoulders. Just because it's hard, doesn't mean I shouldn't try, right? Lena stared at him incredulously before breaking out in a smile. Fine, it's good to have a goal. It's getting late, I think we should end it here. You can always ask me if there is something you don't know. If you will excuse me, I will go and send a letter to my brother to ask for a copy of the Paths We Know. Somehow motivated, the princess left the office. Now alone, Seth leaned back in his chair and sorted his thoughts. Even with all the new things he came to know today, he found that nothing he had to do had changed. Strengthen himself, strengthen his friends, and prepare for war with the scene. When it came to their new district, it would be others to carry the load. Although he sometimes fell for the illusion, Seth knew that one man alone could change the world, but he knew that he could trust his friends with the rest. Seeing that Lena was right and it was getting late, Seth hurried to finally meet Mina and Finn. He didn't look for long, since the two already pounced as he left the office. They guided him to the cafeteria, where they met the rest of the party. Squeezed between friend, food, and drink, Seth was forced by the crowd to recount what he experienced in the abyss. Afterward, it was his turn to hear about what the others went through. The mushroom dungeon sounded fascinating, but their stories were downright horrifying. Can we meet this Angelique? The crowd called Seth to bring out their new comrade. The blacksmith's subordinates varied a lot. One was a massive wasp, the other a powerful Oni, the third was some old adventurer. Hearing Seth describe her as a marble angel, everyone was curious about the new addition. Especially the rowdy crowd made up of oath guards was curious to see a beautiful angel. What can I do for you, master? Everyone wanted to meet you and welcome you to Mina's march. I see. What should I do then? Sit down and enjoy yourself. Eat something, drink something. She nodded. This was how Angelique left Legion and joined the sudden celebration, to the surprise and awe of those present. However, the refined image she gave off as a first impression quickly crumbled when she simply sat down on the bench beside Seth and started to dig in. Her full focus was on the food, as she started eating with her hand, ripping meat from the roasts and shoving food in her mouth with her bare hand, before gulping everything down with the alcohol provided. She ignored any attempt to strike up a conversation, but soon there was a weird tension growing between her and Finn, of all people. He imagined a spark flying as a new rivalry was born and the two fought for supremacy on the dinner table. Even if Seth tried to contend, he stood no chance against these two supernatural gluttony kings. Overall, it still turned out to be a lovely evening, which helped him relax a little after this stressful day. And in the night, he, Finn, and Mina helped each other to relieve some stress. Chapter 810 Exceptions 2 and 3. Over the next few days, Seth mostly took a break. He would spend most of his time with Mina and Finn, as they waited for the return of the other teams. The blacksmith only returned to his workshop once in a while to work on the prototype of the armor of lunacy. Aside from this, he paid a visit to the people Lena had invited. Good morning, Senior White. I didn't expect you to be serious when you said that you would come, he greeted the first person he visited. Stretched out and relaxing on the sofa of the guest room laid a sensual beauty. Skin and hair as pale as snow, with long legs peeking out from her robe and fine fingers flipping through the page of her book. Her pair of almond-shaped eyes with vertical pupils looked up from her book when the blacksmith spoke up. Only the small scale pattern on her cheeks gave an idea of her origin. I told you, I would try to follow once my business was done. Wasn't it you, who offered me a new home? It just took a little longer, because these Krina people wouldn't let me move, she said with a huff. White Snake of the Mountain Lake Leave 177. Seth inadvertently checked her status. It was really the White Snake deity Seth had met in Kavati Kuinan during the Empire's evaluation. Back then she was the deity of a whole region and had used her powers in an attempt to save her people from the sun god's wrath. Although she was unsuccessful and weakened at the time, she had been a great help to their team back then. She guided them through the fog and helped to find the rest of the party. Without her, their chances of dying would have been very high. Did you manage to recover? Seth asked, sitting down opposite her. Only physically. All my people died, there is no way to recover without them, she said solemnly. After his talk with Lena, Seth had a much better understanding of what Senior White was talking about. Deities were like people on their path to becoming a legend, except that their end goal was to become a full-fledged god. But even full gods could experience this. Nas Khorne for example. Despite being a god, Nas Khorne was by far not as imposing a figure as Hades, Apollo, or even Eos. It was all a matter of their believers and the devotion of their belief. Despite her level being high, without her believers and their power, her abilities and strength were severely restricted. Still, the fact that Thaya's discerning eyes couldn't see anything past her level meant that she was by no means weak, even without her believers. I'm sorry, but I believe that I may have a solution that will help both of us, Seth opened the main topic. This was more or less Lena's plan, but it wouldn't work without Seth's groundwork, of having a relationship with the deity to begin with. One of the contingency plans against a possible invasion of Y City was to strengthen the individual T-stations through a guardian figure. In Little Sigma it was Vlad, the incredibly powerful vampire who also acted as the current governor and leader of the city. Someone like Senior White, could take the role of a guardian deity and act in a similar way to Nas Khorne. Languidly, the Snake Lady changed her position on the sofa as she pondered over what he said. It was hard to tell whether she was a snake or a cat at this point. So you give me a home and people to protect, and in exchange, these people will worship me, she asked slowly. Well, the people of Earth are not very experienced when it comes to believing in gods, so you may have to speak with them and teach them how to worship you. But in general, I can guarantee you that we won't allow any foreign religions to settle in your place. What Seth promised technically included all religions currently practiced on Earth, since they all were imported through the Pathworks. The people of Earth had long lost actual belief in something like gods. Except for gods like Samhatch and Nas Khorne who somehow managed to resurface, there was no native religion. That is acceptable. Thank you for offering me a new home. Where will that city be? Is there a nice lake? She readily agreed and moved on to discuss the interior design and landscaping she hoped for. How about you choose one for yourself? I will ask someone to be your guide and you can travel along the tree route and see what place you like, Seth offered her, since he had no idea anymore, where there were any good mountain lakes along the route. She probably wanted one, because her name literally asked for one. Since they were so high up, most tree stations were surrounded by snowy mountains. However, the crown of the hanging tree that stopped the winds and the barrier set in place usually created a moderate climate in its shade. It was absolutely possible that there was a nice mountain lake somewhere under one of the trees. All right, when can we go? She jumped up motivated, yet her voice was still calm, almost emotionless. I will ask a friend who knows the route well. Maybe he can already tell you of a few nice places before you even set off. You can set off as soon as he is ready. Seth said with a smile, seeing her suddenly so active. The blacksmith was going to ask Drosy and the Tijak caravan to take her along and look for a good tree station to settle her. Currently Senior White had the right of first choice. All tree stations, except for Little Sigma, were up for grabs. Cat people? How curious, she exclaimed when he told her about Drosy and his people. Although she didn't talk a lot or showed much expression, Seth was glad she seemed interested in the journey and her travel companions. He was sure, no matter what place she chose, it would quickly grow. After all, in their current world, was more important than living in a place with a strong protector. Colossal Dungeon. Ding! You have leveled up. You are now level 95. Accompanied by the party's collective sigh of relief, a mass being slumped over lifeless and fell down the stairs. Lydia and her part had used the special landing where the elite colossal guards stopped following them last time as a farming spot. They would pull the guard on a chase down the stairway. Minutely controlling their aggro, they managed to make one of them chase them for longer than the others. Pulling them one by one like this was not easy, but safer than trying to face them all at once. By the time party finally leveled up, they had emptied 2 floors of living elite guards in the late level 90s. Hey, I got a weird quest. Something about the last stretch. Archer spoke up, staring at the empty air in front of his face where the quest window only he could see was. You too? Lydia exclaimed. Me 3, Doha spoke up. It was revealed that everyone on the team had gotten the quest, except for Azul, Jess, and James. Why didn't we get that quest? Yeah, the exceptions 2 and 3 piped up indignantly after the rest of the party shared the quest info with them, excluding several words that were beeped out by the system. I guess that path is barred for me since I'm a chimera. Azul said a little depressed. Don't say stuff like that. Yeah, I bet it's just that we are still lacking something. The system, if fair, I doubt it would deliberately exclude you because you are built differently. Jess and James comforted her. Right, look at those two. Despite getting preferential treatment as Orihumas, they didn't get the quest either. I bet there is a requirement that needs to be triggered to get the quest, Lydia assured Azul, ignoring the couple's stinging gazes. I also didn't get that quest, Ferdinand interjected meekly, but nobody paid him any attention. We should return for now. I'm sure Princess Lena or Beemant could help us answer these questions, Dohu suggested. Good idea, we should give this some serious thought before we continue leveling. Lydia agreed. With everyone in agreement, Team 3 abandoned the colossal dungeon. Walking all the way back to the mouse hole they entered through, they were finally able to return to Minas Mar, after leaving the dungeon.